Welcome to the Impactful Leadership Show. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. John Lennon once said, "A dream you dream alone is only a dream. A dream you dream together is reality." Join me as we connect dreams to reality by chatting with innovators from around Washington, D.C. Our show is proudly sponsored by the D.C. chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. This is the Impactful Leadership Show. Welcome to the Impactful Leadership Show. My name is Greg McDonough. It is great to be with you. My guest today is Luke Chung. He is the CEO and founder of FMS Incorporated, and also a former EODC chapter president. So thank you for your service there, Luke, and a leading authority on website development and data security. Welcome, Luke Chung.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. Thank you for having me.
It's great to be with you. So I like just to jump right into things. So let's do that. So first question, you've been on your entrepreneurial leadership journey for some time now, and I'd love to get some insights of any common misconceptions that you've seen around leadership.
Well, thank you. So, with regards to leadership, it's a very broad area and it goes beyond just running a company. How you become a leader, how you work with other people, goes well beyond what a manager does or what somebody may do when they're running a company. Ultimately, leadership is about instilling a team with a sense of purpose and direction, and making sure people understand where they're headed, that they're properly trained, and that everybody is working together. And they do it because they want to do it, because they understand the values and they understand what's going on. I actually learned about this right when I graduated from high school. I went to a conference. I grew up in Florida. I went to a conference in Dallas, Texas, where they had a group of high school seniors. And one of the speakers there was the legendary coach of the Dallas Cowboys, Tom Landry. And he gave a talk about
as a Washington football fan, I'm not sure I like where this is going, but please continue.
Yes, well, his record speaks for itself, and we can contrast leadership styles. So obviously very successful, and he actually gave a very interesting discussion about leadership and how it applied, not just as a coach, but in life. And he started out by saying, let's take a step back. Tom Landry is old school. Hat, coat and tie, arms crossed through the whole game. Didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't yell at people, just stood there. And that was his persona, And we can contrast this, and he later did contrast it to the late John Madden, who was on the other side of the field, very emotional, going crazy, yelling at people, yelling at the refs, and so on. And both were great leaders, as their records would show. And so his style, as he mentioned, was there's a difference between a good coach, a better coach, and a great coach. Mm-hmm. He said a good coach is someone who trains their people. They plan the 6 days before the game. Everything is ready. They know what plays to call. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do when the play is called, right? That's the responsibility of a good coach. You call in a play, everybody executes the way they're supposed to, minimum level. Right. And then the next level is a better coach. And a better coach is someone who can call in a play and their players are trained so that they see the environment has changed and they are able to recognize that and are empowered to call an audible. Something that the coach didn't call in, because they're closer to the data, they see it, and the audible they call is exactly what the coach has trained them to do.
Sure.
Change your plan, go for it. He says a great coach is someone who can train their players so that they call an audible the coach wouldn't call.
Wow, interesting.
They see data that is on the other side of the field and know they can make that call. And he said, I sometimes would stay on the side of the field, see the play change. Roger Staubach, the quarterback, would make an audible. It's like, yes, perfect. You have to do that because the defense shifted, right? And then other times, like, why is he making that call? I wouldn't make that call. And that's because he sees something on the other side of the field that I can't see from my side of the field. And he knows that's what should be called at that time. And then he said, so part of that is creating an environment where your people are empowered to do that and know that they're allowed to do that. They can overrule you because they understand what the end game is. And he said, well, we're going to play games, and Roger Staubach's going to throw interceptions from time to time. I don't need to yell at Roger when he's coming off the field that was a bad play. Roger knows that was a bad play.
That's right.
If he doesn't know that's a bad play, yelling at him in the middle of the game is not going to solve that problem. That's a much bigger problem that should have been handled in practice. Which is the time you can get emotional and go crazy and make sure that people understand what's going on. But by game time, by the time you're ready to play, you better be ready to play.
Right.
And emotion shouldn't be part of it because it messes up your thinking process. The thing that he added to that is we could solve the interception problem. We can solve the interception problem by not throwing the ball. We won't win any games, but we won't have interceptions.
Right.
So it's very important to make sure whatever objectives you have or values you have are such that you still win the game. You have to accept you're going to get a non-0% number of interceptions when you throw the ball. And that's just part of that, and you have to accept it. And that's the same thing whether you're dealing with a football team or dealing with managing people on your company or even your family and kids. You want to inspire people to be able to make the right decisions in new environments that you or they have never seen before. And then when they make mistakes, you have to look back and say, okay, why did that mistake occur? Did that mistake occur because they didn't make the right decision at that point, and therefore they learned so that if that situation arose again, they would make the right decision? Did that mistake occur because we had a certain process in place and they just didn't do it? Was that a problem because they weren't trained properly? Right? But we already know how to do it. They didn't recognize the problem. They didn't apply what we already learned. Or is the problem much further upstream, which is a value problem? Like they have certain values that are just not correct. And we don't have to get to its moral values or anything. It doesn't have to be that deep. But if somebody gets into a situation, they make that mistake, and you rewind and play it again, and they make the same mistake, meaning that they didn't even learn. It could be driven because the values are wrong. Fixing values very different from training a particular task, and that's the same whether it's a child or an employee or a team member.
That's fascinating. I love that insight, Luke. I'd love to jump back a little bit and talk about, that's scary stuff, right? As a business owner, as a parent, as a community member, it's difficult to let go and watch mistakes happen or see my 4-year-old wanting to touch the stove and you want to pull them back because they're going to burn themselves, or do you let them learn that the stove is hot and they shouldn't do it? So at some point in your life, you have to let that go, that parenting aspect. And I'd love to know, like, what point in your life did that occur, like in your business journey, in your family journey, that you realized that, hey, this is the time that I need to let my son or daughter or my employee or whoever make that mistake? Like, what was the transition? Because as an entrepreneur, right, we want to have our hands and control, and we know the outcome because we're always right. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, when over your lifespan so far, like, when did you make that realization that, hey, now is the time for me to step back and just watch this small train wreck happen versus the bigger train wreck down the road?
Right. I mean, I think for me, the learning that I had from Coach Tom Landry's discussions was that there was going to be a non-0% chance of mistakes. And that I have to accept that. And that if I'm expecting 100% accuracy or success, it's just unrealistic. And it's not necessary to win the game, the bigger objective. And so what we want to do, lots of people talk about entrepreneurship, about, taking risks and, hitting home runs, and aren't comfortable with the strikeouts, the losses that are, tied to that kind of attempt, and holding people accountable for negative outcomes when they were doing their best based on the structure that was in place. Right. So what I've learned over the years, and I've been in business, I guess it's our 35th year, is that if there's something that fails, we want to go back and find out why it failed. Right. And look back on, well, do we have a process in place? Because frankly, what I like to be able to do in the whole area of delegations, as you mentioned there, is I think I should be responsible for defining the processes. And then other people should be responsible for executing those. And if I or my team haven't come up with a process for a particular situation, meaning ultimately we never thought about it, how can we expect somebody to deal with an issue that has never been confronted before? And how do we hold them responsible for bad outcomes for that? That's totally unfair.
Certainly.
Right. So what we want to be able to do is define that. I totally accept full responsibility for anything that we've never seen before. I got it. You did your best. We lost X dollars. We missed an opportunity, whatever. That's fine. What did we learn from it? How would we handle it differently? So if the same thing arose again, we would respond differently. And frankly, even after the fact, we may not know how we should have responded. So it's really unfair to hold somebody again, because it's usually not binary. There are probably 10 different choices somebody could have made at a particular situation.
Sure.
And so that has helped me clarify what I'm supposed to be able to do, and the comfort of delegating to other people things that are structured in a way that allows them to win and not feel that they're going to lose. And at the same time, if they have to go beyond something that isn't defined, they're empowered to do that to the best of their ability.
Sure. And then tying it back to the Tom Landry example, right? The playbook is the process, and the execution is Staubach behind the center, about to take the snap, right?
Right.
Do you think, and going back to the comment you made about the late John Madden, was his leadership style similar in that way, or did you see them as different executors or different process, or like how they came up with the playbook? Or
right.
Did you see similar leadership styles but just different personalities on the sideline?
What Tom Landry would say first, would agree, totally different personalities, and a great deal of respect for John Madden's accomplishments. It just wasn't his style, and he described it as, all the work needs to happen in practice, in training. If you get emotional during game, it means you failed in the 6 days prior.
Interesting.
And that wasn't the way to manage that. All right. He didn't feel he got the best out of his team doing that. Now, that said, a stare down from Tom Landry as you came off the field was probably just as effective as
right.
John Madden yelling at you. So, I think the message still gets across. It's just a very different style, a different set of actions, but expectations were probably very similar.
That's right. Yeah, I still have visions of the TV panning during a Washington-Dallas game, and you just see his hat, and like everything just changes, right? I mean, that was part of his image and his brand. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So let's shift focus a little bit. Luke, you just mentioned this is your 35th year in business. You've been the CEO and founder for many, many years. What do you do to stay on top of your game?
Well, I think part of being able to sustain an organization over time, or me personally in it, is to make sure that the objectives or things that I find important are instilled in my organization and what I do day to day. And ultimately, I've been very fortunate to have a successful company doing the things I love. And
Mm.
one of the areas that I do love is being able to create new things, create things that help people, help organizations do something that they've never done before. And so my software company has created a wide range of products and services, solutions to help organizations both domestically and internationally solve challenging problems when it comes to managing data, uh, editing data, and analyzing data. And whether it's on the PC or the web or the cloud, I mean, I've evolved through decades of this, seeing lots of ups and downs in both technology and economic cycles. To be able to apply those to real world problems is very rewarding personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt that as an organization, if we can help people address those challenges, the finances will take care of themselves.
Interesting. And so that's from the business perspective. How about from your personal perspective? You know, what do you do to kind of keep your mental sharpness, your health, your, you know, because it's lonely up top up here at the top at times, you know, on this so-called pyramid. But I'd love to understand, you know, what's Luke Chung's secret to, you know, still coming to the office and having a smile on his face and being innovative and leading, and talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, one of the things that has really helped me over the years is joining the Entrepreneurs Organization. At the time, it was the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, 24 years ago. And I remember it was 24 years ago because I joined when my oldest daughter was a week old, and now she's 24. And a PhD student, in graduate school. So it's been a long journey through that. And I think that, being around other business owners, being around other fathers, mothers, has helped me be a much better business owner, has helped me be a much better spouse, father, friend, son, all those kinds of things, because I have learned from other people the things that work for them, the things that don't, in a very safe and confidential environment that helps me grow, not just as a business person, but as a human being. And I think part of that has also allowed me to be comfortable with balancing work life, which is always a challenge, or family and business, which people have to ultimately come to grapple with when you have so many choices to focus your time.
Sure. It's, over that 24-year period, you've probably seen what, 2, maybe 3 bubbles burst, right? You've got the .com, you had the 08, you've got all this economic, we're in one now, right? This uncertainty. And it's interesting of having an organization and a peer group and some people that you can count on to be next to you when you're going through those tough times or the hard times, or there is a lot of unknown. So I suspect that group, the Entrepreneurs Organization, has really helped on the highs and the lows.
Yes, absolutely. Being around other people who are sharing similar experiences, not necessarily in my industry, but being essentially people who get it and who have had their own highs and lows. I've learned that it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems, at least in my experience. And it has allowed me to venture forth with that positivity, or perspective, I should say, on what's really terrible versus what I may feel is terrible today. On the low end, and then to not get too cocky on the high end, because things can change in a minute. As a small business, I mean, I've told and I've known, I had my business for 10 years before I joined YEO at the time, was that, we're small business. So that means we're one big contract away from a great year and one big contract away from a terrible year. I mean, things
Certainly.
can change very quickly. Lots of things are within our control. It's not like we're Procter and Gamble, selling detergent and reliant on the number of people that live in the US, which grows at 1 or 2% a year. We're doing things that we can control. We could grow our company 100% in a year. We could decline by 50%. There are certain decisions that we may or may not do or execute properly that could swing that very easily.
Certainly. That's great insight. Thank you. Just switching topics a little bit more, I'm a big believer in connecting the dots, right? And there's many times in my life that I now look back and say, oh, of course that made sense, right? It's a straight line. But when I was in that moment, thinking back, it was this random walk. And I'd love to hear if you have similar experiences, or you have an example of an experience like that, where you're sitting there in the moment going, why am I here? And then fast forward 4 or 5 years, it's like, of course, that's exactly where I should have been at that time.
Yeah. We've had a lot of experiences over the year. My company, started in 1987 when I came up with the idea that PCs could be used for business, which was kind of a revolutionary idea at the time because people looked at PCs as toys. That may be what their secretary used, but it really wasn't used for business. And I was on the forefront of managing data at the time, small amounts of data on PCs, but could tell as time was passing that there would be more and more power on the PCs that would eclipse the mini computer market, which completely disappeared, and grow over time. And that's how we started. We were in the DOS era, had a bunch of products, our platform called Paradox, which was a DOS-based platform with Borland. And then Windows came along with Microsoft. They came out with a database called Access. And I was at a trade conference, Comdex, in Las Vegas, where Bill Gates debuted that product. And at that moment, I saw that and said, wow, this is so much better than what we're doing with our current partner, Borland, that we need to make that transition. I almost got on the plane that afternoon to leave Vegas to make that change in our organization because we were behind. Within a few months or within a year, my team came up with a bunch of products or skills to be able to support that. We released a product that then called Total Access Analyzer that helped people within that community, and we grew to be the #1 Microsoft Access third-party vendor. And now we have over 50,000 customers in over 100 countries that we've supported on a technology platform that's lasted, almost 30 years, which is unbelievable for a platform.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Another turning point happened in my company after 9/11, and of course the tragedy of 9/11 with the Pentagon here nearby. I remember seeing the smoke rise from the Pentagon from my office building that morning.
I do too.
Yeah. And, soon following that, people are like, oh, we knew these people were in the country. Various government agencies knew about it, but we couldn't connect the dots, like you mentioned. That became a very common statement. And my team and I were like, well, we analyze data. We know how to connect the dots. We should be able to apply the knowledge and technology that we have to make those connections. And we built a prototype, totally unrelated to our existing business. It managed lots of data and could look for hidden relationships among people, places, and events. And then we pitched it to some of the local government agencies because of friends and family that we know, about how we would approach this situation. But we were very naive because we weren't a government contractor. We didn't know how the security system worked, the classified world in the US. And we were like, well, this is nice, #1. #2, you're not on a government schedule, so even if I wanted, I couldn't buy it. And number three, you don't have clearance. Who let you in my room? Get out of here. So it took us a while to figure that out, but eventually we had a solid prototype, reached out to more people, created a product called Sentinel Visualizer, and ended up getting an investment from InQtel, which is the CIA's venture capital arm. So we're part of that family. And as a result of that, we've been able to evolve that product now over 15 years to be used in a non-classified environment with customers, again, all around the world, primarily government, state and local in the US, some federal, and then other government agencies, both at like the UN level and also at individual countries. It's all a matter of helping people maximize the value of their data to keep citizens safer.
Certainly, certainly. It certainly sounds, and your history is showing that you've been a visionary and had your finger on the pulse of what other people haven't seen coming. So the question that leads me into, like, what are you excited about? What excites you about the future now? Like, what are you seeing? Where do you think the next opportunity is? What gets you energized about the future?
Well, with the future, I think there are two tacks here in terms of where I think things are going or what's important to me. So at this stage, my two daughters are out of the house, so we have an empty nest. So there was a period of just making sure I spent time with them, and we've passed that. So that was a major milestone. Although COVID sent them back home for a year, which we loved, but they hated because they had to stay at home and couldn't see their friends who were nearby. But I think we're getting through that. But still, I'm at a different stage of my life with regards to family. With regards to business, I've done well. I'm really, concerned and passionate about making sure the people on my team have good careers, good lives, and we create opportunities for them so that they can take care of their families and their mortgages and their tuition bills and everything else that they want to do with their life, their retirement, and so on. So that's a high priority for me. And in terms of taking care of our customers, we have a wide range of customers, and I love engaging with them to understand, what they're dealing with and the opportunities that they're creating for their own people, the people they serve, whether it's in the commercial area, whether it's in maybe some human services or government-related areas, or in some of the work that we're doing in law enforcement and counterterrorism. Those there's some really bad people out there doing terrible things to people who don't deserve it, and if there's anything I can do to help people who, goodness gracious, risk their lives much more than I do. I just sit behind a computer. I'm happy to help. And if we can do that in a way that is moral, right? Because there is obviously huge misuse of data that can be done to trample on people's rights. We want to make sure we're on the correct side of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. So let's step back a little bit and talk about your background. Like, the audience would love to know where you grew up, how you got to be where you are today. Like, take us through the quick journey of Luke Chung's life.
My parents are immigrants from Taiwan, and I was born in New York. Grew up there for a few years, moved to Philadelphia, but primarily grew up in Florida, in the Orlando and Sarasota areas from like 4th grade on. Graduated from high school down there. And so that was a immigrant child experience. But it was I didn't really live in Asian communities. Like, my house was the Chinatown of the town. So there wasn't a real connection to that side of the culture. But I ended up graduating from college, went to Harvard, spent 4 years there, was pursuing a degree in engineering, and ended up in studying oceanography. So I ended up studying physical oceanography, got a master's in that, and at the time was doing some research funded by the Office of Naval Research in predicting ocean weather, essentially currents, speeds, where they went. Did a summer project at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and went up and down the Oregon, California coast, where I proceeded to vomit up and down the Oregon, California coast, because the ocean is really big and the waves can be really big. And I have a very good stomach. I was literally the last man standing in the scientific crew, but I decided that probably wasn't a good career path for me. So
talk about going with your gut feel, right?
yes, there was, there were higher powers telling me that may not be the direction I should go. So I ended up getting a management consulting job. That there were recruiters on campus. It was one of those traditional do it for 2 years, work like a dog, and then go to business school path. And so I did that. I got a job in Washington, D.C. at a company called Strategic Planning Associates. They no longer exist, but they were a strategic planning company. Kind of the founder was a former Boston Consulting Group guy, and doing commercial work, no government work. It's all commercial work, and learned a lot about business strategy, how their Fortune 100, 500 type company clients were working, and how to use data to help make better decisions. And it was from that, after 2 years, that I saw the opportunity to apply that in a potential business that was focused completely on using data for business decision making, that I started FMS, which was originally called Financial Modeling Specialist. And I decided, I'll give it a year, and if it doesn't work, I'll come up with another plan and be a good corporate soldier the rest of my life. So fortunately, I haven't had to do that yet. So every year, you never know. It could be the year. Go back and get my business degree or whatever degree. But so far, it's worked out. And I met a lot of very interesting people there. Ended up working with two people that Nigel Morris and Rich Fairbank, who ended up creating Capital One. And so some other people who ended up doing lots of different things in the corporate world. So it was all very good.
That's
and
awesome.
Then from there, I started my business. That was in '87, and have been doing that as I mentioned. The company has evolved in lots of different ways over those years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, one of the fun things about hosting a podcast is you spend a lot of time Googling your guests. And I Googled Luke Chung, right? And you've had quite the media exposure from a handful of different things. Any story there you want to share?
Well, my media experience has been quite fascinating because it came along rather unexpectedly. I mean, within my technology community, I've gone and spoken at conferences and written blogs and participated in discussions that were very IT focused. But in the 2007 timeframe, I ended up at a EO entrepreneur organization conference up in New Jersey, where I sat in on a couple of talks where presenters were giving information on how to, number one, deal with social media, amplify your message through social media, write blogs, participate in blogs or discussion groups online, and then another presentation on media training, how to deal with TV media, how to deal with reporters, things like that. And when I was sitting in those sessions, I was thinking, wow, this is a complete waste of time. I have never dealt with TV media in my 20 plus years at that point. I should be down at the craps table. I really, this is a waste of an hour of my life. Well, lo and behold, a week later, the healthcare.gov website debuted. And when that happened, I went on the website because I wanted to see what their prices were compared to what I had to buy health insurance for our people. I went on the website and discovered that the website was awful, technologically awful. And so based on what I learned the week prior, I was like, oh, I should write a blog about this. So I wrote a blog post about how it was a technology disaster, really just for my little community. And what I didn't realize was, as I got into discussions with other people, as I, tweeted about it and commented on other people discussing it, I came to realize that I was one of the few people who were talking about the website from a technology perspective. There were a lot of people who were against the website because they didn't like the administration. There were a lot of people who were saying that the website was great, just had a few hiccups because there were so many people that wanted it. And I was like, well, this thing isn't going to work with two people on it because it's just written by people that don't know what they're doing. Because I could tell from a technology perspective how poorly written the website was, and how why it crashed and the wrong order that they had placed things and so on. Anyway, so the blog went viral, which I had never experienced before. And then within a week, all of a sudden on one day, I got quoted in the New York Times and Forbes on the same morning, which was unbelievable. And then everything blew up after that. I had the CBS News crew come into my office that day. We did a filming. I aired on the CBS National News the next morning. That led to a call from Wolf Blitzer's team on CNN, who showed up in my office later that afternoon. And then I was on their show the next day. I got called in by Fox. I got called in by the House Energy and Commerce Committee to meet with them to explain to them why I could tell that the website was a mess in the first hour, when they couldn't figure it out after dealing with it for 3 years. And then it led to even more issues with regards to other media appearances where I was the technology guy, and I was very careful to not get into the political side of things about being able to discuss what was wrong with the website, what was wrong with government contracting, what were the things that led to that kind of fiasco, and the huge waste of money that was entailed accompanying that. And it was a circus. It was a circus, but it was a fun ride. It was a fun ride. At least nobody was attacking me. I wasn't involved in the project. I could just kind of view it from the outside, but it was pretty obvious.
I was reading through the blog, the original blog that went viral yesterday, and then I started going through the comments. And one thing I noticed that you responded to every comment, which I thought was amazing. But what was really ironic for me is I was running a company at the time, and one of my IT people was one of the commentators, made one of the comments, and I recognized the name, and it just brought back this flashback for me that shouldn't you have been working instead of commenting on this blog? Well, so speaking of social media, Luke, where could people find you? Are you a LinkedIn guy, a Twitter guy, a Facebook? Where someone from our audience wants to learn more about Luke, other than just Googling, what's your preferred sort of social media path?
My probably LinkedIn would be the most appropriate for this audience. My LinkedIn's just Luke Chung, LukeChung. Can connect there. Obviously, we can have email communications after that, and would be happy to do that.
Awesome. And what's their main blog site?
My is blog.fmsinc.com. So my main original business is fmsinc.com. The stuff that we're doing in the law enforcement counterterrorism space is sentinelvisualizer.com.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, Luke, thanks for being with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation, especially around your empowering your team and your consideration for their wellness and livelihood as an entrepreneur and a business owner, right? That's, to me, sort of a different phase of life and progress, where when we first start out our businesses, it's all about drive and getting things done. And then I think as we mature, we also start really caring about the people who work for us and the people that work for them. And you start thinking about legacy. And we've touched on that today. And I really appreciate, your openness around that topic. And I found it to be insightful.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed having the conversation with you as well.
Awesome. And for those of you in the audience, feel free to reach out to to me or to Luke about this topic. If you know of somebody that would be a good guest, I would love to hear from you there. Anyway, so I'll close out today. Luke, again, it was great to have you on the Impactful Leadership Show. This is Greg McDonough, and I hope you guys have a healthy and safe day.
And that's a wrap, my friends. Thank you for spending your time with me. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at impactfulleadershipshow.com. One last food for thought. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone.